Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, I will be making a leather wallet. This is something that's been on my bucket list for at least 2 years. Today we'll finally get to it. I start by cutting out a prototype made out of paper. The tools needed for this step is just a X-Acto knife or a box cutter and a stapler and some thick, stiff paper. Having cut out all the theoretical pieces, I now dry fit assemble them together to see how they fit together. I mark some rough stitch lines. I use this gift card as a reference credit card. I realized that the middle part should not be stitched together, so I kinda scratch it out. Good thing this is just a prototype. Now I simulate the stitching by stapling the pieces together with a stapler. So I ended up making 3 prototypes and 3 iterations actually, and I'll go through the improvements. So this was the initial prototype, and as you can see, I very quickly recognized that we will have ugly stitch marks on the back. So to fix that, we need something like maybe an extra piece on the back, which is this prototype. So here you see I covered up some of the stitch lines. But then when I was testing this out, I noticed that the top level could be actually trimmed down to be the same as the second level. And so this is the final prototype. And how it works is so this is what it looks like. And you can fit 3 cards and a wad of cash. So this is the first card.
this is the second card. Well, that works. And then here, one side has a space for cash, while the other side is spaced for the credit card. This side. Okay. And then just a simulated cash, you fold up a bill into quarters and it's about this size. And that you just tuck it in here. Like so. And so this is the final pattern that I need to cut out. And to assemble them, they go together like so. So now let's start building them.
I'm using a piece of leather I bought from Tandy Leather during their Memorial Day sale. I cut out a piece beforehand that fits all the pieces that I will need to cut out. To cut, I'm just using my box cutter and a ruler. It works surprisingly well. In this video, I will be trying something different. Instead of showing every step, I will only be showing maybe the first time I perform a step and then skipping the rest. Making anything is a very repetitive process, which is not very entertaining to watch. I started off with a oversized piece and gradually trimmed my way down to these final pieces that are cut to size. This is a technique I learned from woodworking. I use a set of calipers to mark the finer cuts. Again, just using my box cutter to cut them out. I use this skiving knife to cut the corners. All the pieces have been cut out. I use an edge beveler to round the edges that will be in contact with the user. I use Tokonole to finish these edges that I just beveled. I use a slicker to smooth these edges and make them shiny. Now I start gluing the pieces together along the edges. I'm using a glue called EcoWeld. I apply a thin, even coat all the way up to the edges. This glue has a long working time, and I actually need to wait for the glue to become tacky before I can glue the two pieces together. I'm trying to match the edges up perfectly. Now I scribe the stitch lines along the edge. I punch the stitch holes using this diamond punch. I use this homemade stitching pony to hold the wallet in place while I stitch it together. I'm using this saddle stitch that I just recently learned online off of YouTube. Again, you probably have better things to do than watch me stitch this wallet together all day, so I just skip to the end. I trim off the excess thread using this pair of scissors I got when I bought a leather making set from Korea. Now for the fun part, I melt the excess thread down. This keeps the threads from coming undone. I hammer the stitch lines to even them out. Just some gentle tapping. Now I mark the edges where I'm planning to skive off some of the leather to make it thinner along the edge. This also removes the finish, which helps the leather adhere to each other better. I use my box cutter to score along the edge. Now I use my skiving knife to cut a thin piece out along the edges. I cut off some of the corner as well, as the corners will be rounded. Now I glue the edges together. I punch out the corners using this round punch. I beveled the corners that were just punched out. Now I skip a lot of the repetitive steps towards the end. If I didn't say anything, you might not have even noticed. I'm punching out the 2 final corners. Now I mark the final stitch lines. I punch holes along the stitch lines. I use a different 2-prong punch for the corners. Now I stitch everything together. I sand the edges down so that it is even and smooth. So on and so forth, you get the idea. Now I bevel the edges. I apply Tokonole to finish the edges. I'm paying careful attention not to get this onto the finished leather. I'm also not painting the edges because I want a more natural look.
All right, so what I made was actually the 3rd wallet in the stack. And again, I had to go through a few iterations to arrive at the wallet that I feel meets my expectations. So the first one is this one, and so this is what I initially started off with. This material is a sort of suede, kinda. It's really stretchy, which made it really hard to work with. So this one was the first one I made, and it's really rough around the edges, you know. And also I noticed, yeah, the edges were really not clean. It's also not really stiff enough, I think, in my opinion, to be a suitable wallet. So this is the second one. So I switched materials to a stiffer leather. And as you can see in the first one, during the assembly process or construction process, I glued up the pieces before I stitched them. So, and then afterwards, you can't really go back and stitch it. So that was a mistake that I made sure to remedy. So in this one, you can see the stitch lines for the pocket for the cash. And yeah, the main thing I was unhappy with for the second iteration was that I thought the stitch lines were a bit too far from the edge, which makes it look less elegant than it otherwise could be. Also the edge, it's a bit fat, and I was thinking I could skive the edges in order to make it look better. And so that brings us to the final iteration. You know, the stitch lines you can see are a lot closer to the edge. The edge itself actually is a bit thinner because I skived it. And so, yeah, so this is what I'm gonna go with. Anyways, thanks for watching.